What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 league-winning wide receivers that you guys should be looking to draft this year in fantasy football, trying to shoot for some upside, looking at some of these players going in the early rounds, trying to hit on those picks. If you enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Questions, comments, feel free to drop them down below. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But let's just dive right into my first must-draft league winner, and it's going to be Nico Collins. He's going off the board as the wide receiver 7. In my personal rankings, I have him as my wide receiver 5 at my 109, and I think we're kind of getting him here at a discount because of his post hamstring strain production, where if we remember the first 4 healthy games of the 2024 season, Nico Collins looked like he had wide receiver 1 overall potential, was just going to be a straight up league winner. His first 4 games, he went 6 for 117, 8 for 135 and a touchdown, 4 for 86, and then 12 for 151 and a touchdown. Over that 4-game stretch, was averaging 22.7 points per game. Now, I know it's a small sample size, but that is a very strong number, a very strong stretch, and it's not like that number is buoyed by touchdowns, right? He didn't score, 1 to 2 touchdowns every single game. He only scored 2 touchdowns in those 4 matchups, but the volume was there, 80-plus yards in all 4 of them, 115-plus yards in 3 of the 4. Then he returns from that injury. He's fine. The Texans offense isn't anything special. He averages, 15 points per game to close out the last 8 games of the season. But even as a whole, including, the games post-injury, he had an incredibly efficient season, was 3rd in yards per out run. He was 4th in fantasy points per out run. He was 7th in yards per team pass attempt, 9th in target rate. Now, I do think there are still some concerns here. This Texans O-line was definitely an issue last year. They're still likely going to be a bottom-tier unit, but I do have a little bit more confidence in their new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, not really putting C.J. Stroud in some of the tough situations, the tough down and distances that he was in last year. And it just comes down to the fact that I believe Nico Collins has the talent to be a high-end wide receiver 1. I think we got a little taste of it early on last year. And I do just think heading into 2026, he can be in those Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua conversations when it comes to fantasy football wide receivers. I'm also a believer in CJ Stroud. I think he can have a nice kind of bounce back here. The very impressive year 1, kind of took a little bit of a step back last year. I think he can have a really strong year 3. The next wide receiver I want to talk about here is Brian Thomas Jr., and he's actually going right after Nico Collins at the wide receiver position. He's going off the board as the wide receiver 8. And I actually don't disagree with his positional ranking, but I do think he should be more locked in as a very, very early round 2 pick, where I have him in my top 13. He's my 201 in my rankings, whereas on some platforms you can get him 203, 204, 205, 206, and I think that's crazy. Now, I think a lot of people have kind of accepted or understand that he did have a very impressive rookie season, but I still think some people are potentially underrating how good it was. And maybe it's because Malik Neighbors came in and was even better from a point per game perspective. And Malik Neighbors obviously also had this insane season. So maybe it kind of overshadowed BTJ a little bit. But Brian Thomas Jr. scored the 6th most PPR points by a rookie wide receiver in NFL history. Now, it obviously helps that he did play a full 17-game season. He's ahead of Malik Neighbors in that stat, because Neighbors played 15. But he was still the wide receiver 11 in points per game in year 1. He ended the season just on fire. Last 6 games, 22.9 points per game. And he also just commanded a ton of volume during that stretch, 11.7 targets a game. And so he put together this super strong season in a pretty rough offensive environment. The Jaguars had the 7th lowest scoring offense. They had the 9th fewest passing yards. Their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, missed 7 games. And Mac Jones was the QB1 when BTJ was going on that crazy stretch to end the season. Now he's getting Liam Cohen to be his head coach. He just led the 4th highest scoring offense with the Buccaneers. And then when we look at BTJ as a player, I just don't think he has any glaring weaknesses. Coming into the NFL, there were some concerns on how well-rounded he was going to be as a wide receiver. Did he have a super diverse route tree? Because in college, he was very much down the field, deep threat. You knew that would translate, but you didn't know if he could do some of the underneath stuff, get some of those manufactured touches. and he 100% delivered across the board. He was great down the field. He was fifth in deep targets, fifth in deep receiving yards, but he also commanded targets at a high level. He was great after the catch, fourth in yak, and then he got into the end zone. He was fifth in touchdowns, efficient also, eighth in yards per route run. And so, like I mentioned, I think he should be very much in that like Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown tier, whereas right now he's more in like the Drake London, A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey range, which I still like those other wide receivers. I just think he should be a step ahead, with the Amon-Ra's, the Malik Neighbors, the Nico Collinses. Now, I'm kind of cheating here because the next player is actually not going to be a wide receiver, but it is a pass catcher, and I kind of just wanted to talk about Brock Bowers. So he's going off the board as the tight end one. Obviously, I also have him as my number one tight end, but I think he might be another player where his rookie season is actually getting a little bit underrated. He had the most receiving yards by a rookie tight end in NFL history. He averaged 15.5 PPR points per game. He led the NFL in targets, air yards, receiving yards, yak, and deep targets at the tight end position. And he only scored 5 touchdowns. So this wasn't like a Sam Laporta rookie season where he really hit in the touchdown department and that kind of, elevated his overall point per game number. He did not hit in the touchdowns and was still a locked in high end tight end one. And he did it on a pretty poor Raiders offense. They were the 4th lowest scoring unit. They had the 10th fewest passing yards, 11th fewest passing attempts. And I kind of mentioned, Sam Laporta, right? I could see some people maybe being concerned. Laporta, really strong rookie season, one of the best fantasy rookie tight end seasons of all time. And then he kind of flops in year 2, right? He wasn't awful, but he certainly didn't pay off where you drafted him. But I just think this is a very different situation. Like Brock Bowers has been considered a top tier talent for a very long time. He was the number 2 tight end in his high school class. He led Georgia in receiving yards by almost 400 yards as a true freshman on a team that had a healthy Ladd McConkey, Jermaine Burton, Adonai Mitchell, James Cook. He came in, competed with, guys that are currently in the NFL, very strong college players, and he outproduced all of them as a tight end in year 1. You just don't really see that happening. Also, Darnell Washington at the tight end position. And then this offseason, he also got a major quarterback upgrade where he's going to be going from Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell to Geno Smith, who I think is going to be able to come in and really, support his weapons better than the previous quarterback play they did have. And so you look at the general range where he's being drafted, he's going in a similar range as guys who project as like back-end wide receiver ones. You're looking at like an A.J. Brown, a Drake London, a Ladd McConkey. Now, I think those guys might have a little bit more upside than back-end wide receiver one. A.J. Brown's had a couple of wide receiver 8 seasons in points per game with the Eagles. Drake London was a high-end high-end wide receiver 2 last year. Like, he could take another leap in year 4, and then Ladd could also potentially take a leap. But I think a median expectation is these guys probably are, back-end wide receiver 1 options. And I think Brock Bowers has the upside to straight up outperform those guys. Like guys going in a similar range, but you can play him at tight end, and he could just have such an extreme positional advantage. And so I would much rather take a Brock Bowers in that early round 2 area, and then take a Tyreek Hill, a T. Higgins, someone like that in the mid to late 3rd round, as opposed to reaching up for an A.J. Brown, a Drake London, a Ladd, and then who knows what you're going to end up getting at the tight end position. So not a wide receiver, cheating a little bit, but he is a pass catcher and a very, very good one. Then the next player here is going to be T. Higgins. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 12. And I kind of understand why people are maybe a little bit lower on, him this year than where he finished in 2024. I do think he's probably due for some regression. He's coming off a wide receiver 5 season in points per game, put up 18.5 points per game. His previous best was 15.7. And so, maybe that's kind of his peak outcome that we saw in 2024. He also only played 12 games. Injuries have been an issue. Wasn't a full, 17 game sample size. But he's going pretty much a full round behind guys like A.J. Brown and Drake London. And that kind of seems extreme. Maybe T. Higgins' 18.5 points per game is his peak, but A.J. Brown's peaked at 17.6 points per game with the Eagles over his 3 seasons. Drake London just put up 16.5 points per game and doesn't necessarily have a clear, locked in, really strong quarterback option, like Penix is still somewhat of a question mark. And this is not me like being low on A.J. Brown or Drake London. I think they are very solid picks. I just think T. Higgins is a really nice value if you're getting him in like the middle of the third round, because we know the Bengals are going to be a high scoring offense. The defense is still going to be below average. They're going to be a high volume passing attack. They're going to be needing to get into these shootouts. And he also has elite quarterback play with Joe Burrow. And so maybe Higgins doesn't have quite the same like peak upside. Like, maybe Saquon goes down and all of a sudden A.J. Brown is, a 20 plus point per game guy. I do think he has the talent to do it. It's just the situation hasn't been there. Maybe Michael Penix hits and Drake London's the wide receiver one on a really good passing attack. But I think like the median outcomes are that these guys are probably going to score in a similar range. And so maybe T. Higgins isn't like the home run pick in the middle of round 3, but still, if you're getting the wide receiver 5 in that area, which he did last year, I think that's a really strong option. But you're also bypassing, right? If you take a London or an A.J. Brown a round earlier, you're bypassing an opportunity to potentially draft a BTJ, a Brock Bowers, Devon Achane, someone like that, who I do think could be league winners at their respective positions. And then for the 5th and final wide receiver here, I want to talk about Tyreek Hill. And he's someone who I originally thought I'd be pretty out on heading into this season. A 31-year-old wide receiver coming off his worst fantasy season since his rookie year. Typically that type of profile, once an older wide receiver starts to show some signs of falling off, declining in play, you typically just want to fade that profile. However, this specific year, I'm kind of in on him, and I think it has to do with just the wide receiver position and what you're looking at after you have like that Drake London, A.J. Brown, Lad McConkey. I'll throw T. Higgins into that tier, even though some people might not agree. But I think after that tier, the wide receiver position just really falls off, especially in terms of upside. Now, in that next grouping, I did really like Rashee Rice, now that he's probably getting hit with a decent suspension. I'm obviously out on him in that range that I was originally willing to draft him in. But so you're looking at guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I like some of those guys at their ADP. I'm totally cool drafting Garrett Wilson like the late third. Same thing with like a Devontae Adams. I'm cool with Mike Evans in a similar range. But all of them feel like they're fairly limited in terms of their upside, right? JSN, what's that Seahawks offense going to look like? I also just think like his skill set, his archetype, it's not going to be like a league winning option. Terry McLaurin was just the wide receiver 13 in points per game while hitting in the touchdown department. And so, like I said, I don't hate those guys, but are they really going to be league winners for you? I think no. Tyreek Hill is one season removed from averaging 23.5 PPR points per game. He was 1 yard shy of hitting 1,800 receiving yards. And then you can kind of start to create the excuses for why his 2024 season wasn't great. He suffered a wrist injury last August. He played through it all season. Could have definitely been bothering him. Tua also missed some time, and for whatever reason, when Tua's out of this Dolphins offense, the entire thing just completely falls apart, and the offense just gets nuked. So the splits with and without Tua were pretty drastic. He still wasn't amazing with Tua in the lineup, but he was, significantly worse when Tua was out. And so I'm very aware of the risks. I do think Hill might just be on like the downside of his career, and he might just, not have that same upside he's had in previous seasons. But he's the only player being drafted in this range where like I can conceivably see him ending up being the wide receiver 1 overall. And I actually feel like he's the only wide receiver that's like not going in round 1 that I think has a legit shot to be wide receiver 1 overall. Like A.J. Brown, Drake London, Ladd, they could all be really solid. I don't think they're going to be the wide receiver 1. Obviously, you can see the case for like the Jamar Chases, the Justin Jeffersons, CeeDee Lamb, guys like that. But if Tyreek Hill is healthy, Tua stays healthy, and this is the same dude we saw in 2022 just tear up the league, he could 100% be a league winner for you, and you can draft them in the middle of the 3rd round. And so that is going to wrap it up for my 5 league-winning pass catchers. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree with my takes? Let me hear it down below. Thank you all for stopping by. Stay tuned. Tomorrow I'll have the same video, but for the running back position. But thank you guys again, and I'll see you in the next one.